A constant problem with woodworking is dealing with sawdust, especially if you're a machine tool woodworker. Now, hand tool woodworkers create more shavings than they do sawdust, so it's not quite as big a deal. And while sawdust, shavings, all of that stuff is a mess, if you're like me and the wood shop is in the house, you got to worry about tracking all of this dust all over the house. That goes with shavings, it gets stuck to your shoes as well as the regular sawdust. But the big issue is health and safety. Sawdust is not good for your lungs. That's one advantage to the shavings from hand tool woodworking. But power tools create a much finer dust, and keeping that out of your lungs is your number one concern. Of course, the secondary concern is safety. Sawdust piles up in corners, under things, around the motors for your machines, and that can create a fire hazard. A motor covered in sawdust is going to run hotter, more likely to have an issue, and it's covered with combustible sawdust, so a fire is way more likely to happen. So you got to keep this stuff at bay. You got to deal with it somehow. Here in my shop, my first line of defense is a dust collection system. I have an Oneida cyclonic style dust collector. It's really a pretty good dust collector. I think it's a 3 horsepower model, and it has ductwork that goes to various pieces of equipment throughout the shop. It doesn't do 100%, and I don't think any dust collector will ever catch 100% of the dust, but it probably gets 80 to 90%, especially at the table saw. And the surface planer creates huge amounts of dust. If you're planing down a whole lot of boards for a cabinet project or something, you can create massive amounts of sawdust, and collecting it at the source is really a good idea. And it does a pretty good job. Both the design of my DeWalt planer and the Oneida dust collector really work well together. I have very little sawdust around the shop when I'm using that system. Of course, my table saw has a dust port down low around the motor, so all the stuff that falls below the table gets collected, and the stuff right at the guard when you can use the guard. Can't always use a guard on a table saw, so you don't always have that option. Bandsaw's got a high and a low port. Surface planer has a dust port. I've got a dust port over by my lathe, but it really doesn't collect much unless you're just doing hand sanding at the lathe. Then it does a pretty good job of collecting that fine dust, but it doesn't collect any of the shavings and chips that come while you're turning. Now, when we built the house, we knew the wood shop was going to be down here in the basement, so we set up a little alcove just for the dust collector. We bought the dust collector as part of the expense of building the house and got it all wired and set up without all the ductwork run at that time. But we did work with Oneida to design the ductwork system based on the tools that I had at the time and the layout that I thought I was going to have. Of course, if you fast forward to today, the layout isn't the same, the assortment of tools isn't exactly the same, but the system still does a really good job. It collects in about a 30-gallon drum. Have a plastic liner in that, so it's easier to take out and empty. And being in another room, that system doesn't take any space out of the wood shop itself. So it's really worked out very well. I have a little strobe light that goes with that system that flashes when it gets close to full, so I can tell when I need to empty it. Otherwise, you got to go back there and take the lid off every now and then. Lasts quite a while just using the table saw and things like that. But boy, if you're running the surface planer creating a lot of dust, it might fill up in a day. Smaller handheld tools often do better with a vacuum style dust collector. Over in this part of the shop, I've got a little Festool. It's one of their smallest units, but it does a really good job. You plug the power cord from the tool into the dust collector. Vacuum hose goes to the tool itself. And when you turn the tool on, the dust collector comes on, and then it runs for a few seconds after you're through with the tool to try and get all the dust cleared out. And this is a really good system, both the way Festool designs their dust collection and the tools, and working with the little portable dust collector. This produces very little airborne dust. It works really well. I have a similar system, except it's a fine vacuum that I have over by my miter saw, and that does a pretty good job. Miter saws are notorious for being hard to collect dust around, so it's far from perfect and does not collect all the dust, but it gets quite a bit of it. When it comes to the airborne dust that just kind of drifts around the shop, and if you look in your wood shop, you're going to have a little fine layer of sawdust on everything. That's the stuff you're breathing in, and that's the stuff that's really bad for you. So when it comes to that, I have an air filter system, and I started off with one of these little Win models. It helps, but it takes a while before it filters all the air in the room, and a lot of dust settles out long before it's through filtering all the air. But it does help. You got to clean the filter on it fairly regularly so you know it's actually getting some of the dust out of the air. So not a bad system, but a little bit on the underpowered side. About 6 months ago, I added a Laguna model that is about 3 times as powerful, also a lot noisier, but it really moves air. If you actually have papers sitting on the workbench, it will actually pull the papers off and blow them around the room because it is moving so much air. So it's a much more effective system, pulls a lot more dust out of the air, and cleans the air in general a lot faster. But that still is not a perfect system. There's always going to be a little bit of fine dust. And for that reason, you really should wear a dust mask or a respirator every time you're in the shop. This is one of those things, the more comfortable it is, the easier it is to wear, the more likely you are to wear it. A big heavy respirator, even though we should wear those in the wood shop, most woodworkers don't. Little paper dust masks are fairly common. And these cloth masks, this one is from a company called Basecamp. They did send me this at no cost to try out, but they're not paying me for the video. Unlike some of the others I've tried, it has a little head strap in the back. And because of that head strap, it stays put better. Some of the other ones that just have the neck strap back here tended to want to creep down around your chin, and they weren't as effective long term. So this is pretty comfortable. It's not too tight. It has dual exhalation valves, so it's easy to exhale. Has a little clip over the nose, so my glasses are less likely to fog up. And if you wear glasses, you know how big a nuisance it is to have your glasses fogging up. So this is a pretty good mask. I've been pretty happy with it. I've had it for about a month now. So far, have no complaints. It came with replacement filters that have a carbon element in them. So these are good for quite a few different things. Even if you don't have any of the other dust collection system, wearing a dust mask and leaving it on until all of the dust is settled, you're through sweeping up for the day, all that, will do wonders to keep you healthy. Now they say this meets the standards for an N99 mask, so it's collecting 99.9% of the dust particles. That's really very good. When I was working on the fire department and running medical calls, when we were concerned about respiratory infection, N95 masks were the standard. So this is actually a little bit better than those N95 masks were. So whether you use the link below to buy a Basecamp mask or buy some other dust mask, or even wear the little paper dust masks, wearing a dust mask is in your own best interest when you're working in the wood shop. I'm going to try and be better about it. Probably won't be perfect, but I'm going to try and wear one way more often than I have in the past. And having one that's nice and comfortable is really going to help. I do hope you found this video helpful. I appreciate you taking your time to watch. We'll see you for the next one.